For this particular session, we're really fortunate to have 4 AI-first companies here that have conquered those ABCs. They built AI-viable products, and they're building a barrier through strong data moats. And the companies that we have here today, in the order that will come up, is Inside Sales, Lilt, Ayasdi, and Genesys. Inside Sales offers the sales industry's first comprehensive sales acceleration platform that creates high-performance sales teams through their breakthrough machine learning technology. Lilt is the engine for enterprise translation. Ayasdi is the leader in building intelligent applications with complex data and AI. And Genesys is the world's #1 customer experience platform, and they have been shipping a platform for 25 years, have 10,000 customers, and are one of the unique stories of not starting with a clean piece of paper for AI, but actually melding it into an existing business. So with that, we're going to start with Inside Sales. Dave Boyce is here from Inside Sales. Dave, do you want to come up?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Dave is the Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Customer Officer at Inside Sales. He effectively defines the corporate and product strategy and AI direction at Inside Sales. He has a very rich history. He's been an operating executive at multiple companies in areas such as marketing, sales, product, corporate development, and being CEO. In companies like Profit Logic, Oracle, and the Monitor Group for Consulting. He's also a board member at Forrester, and he's a senior lecturer at business schools. And with that, Dave, let me start by asking you, tell us a little bit about the history of Inside Sales, because you were one of the early companies that figured out how to implement AI into these line of business applications.
Sure. So Inside Sales, just so we can have some context, we got 15 minutes to chat here. I want to make sure that everybody comes along with us. Inside Sales was born of, I'm not the founder of Inside Sales. So Dave Elkington founded Inside Sales, and he's a machine learning guy, and he wanted to find a data set that could be rich enough to do things unique on the planet. And the idea that he came across was, what if we took, and he wanted to be in the flow of revenue, because that's what kind of companies and CEOs care about revenue. And a lot of the work in the kind of, in the marketing funnel, you think about building awareness and then turning that into interest and turning that into opportunities and closing it into deals. That's kind of the funnel of deals. He wanted to be somewhere in that flow because that's the revenue engine. Came across the idea that what if we took CTI, computer telephony integration, and connected it with CRM in the cloud? Would that create a unique data set? And it would, because yesterday sales reps used to use the phone to call someone, and then they would hang up, and then all the data about that interaction between a salesperson and a prospect would disappear. The only chance it wouldn't disappear is if that sales rep swiveled and typed in 3:01 p.m., attempted phone call, Mary Jones, no answer, enter into their CRM. And of course, no sales rep on the planet would ever do that. But if you connect CTI to CRM, then I know everything about that phone call, and it gets reliably logged. So he thought, oh my goodness, now I can know time of day, day of week, target geography, target industry, target company, target title, and then I can know prevailing conditions at the time of that interaction. I know whether the call was answered or not. I know if it was answered, was it by a machine or a human? If it was answered by a human, how long did the phone call last? And then I can log that against an object in CRM, so I know if it was part of a sequence of events that resulted in a sale or part of a sequence of events that resulted in a not sale. All that data had been disappearing past, and you talked about data exhaust. Let's just grab all that data in the natural course of a sales rep doing her job, and then I can start, once I get enough, I can start recommending more of what works and less of what doesn't. So that was kind of the genesis, and it's come, no pun intended, sorry, where are you, Slava? That was kind of the genesis idea, and we're now to, it's interesting, there's a lot of data exhaust that comes off of sales activities. We're now to 6 trillion data points, around about 100 billion sales interactions. We've added email, So we know the same types of things about email, was it answered or not, and what time of day, and what day of week, and by which titles, and which industries. And we can really guide a sales team towards the seam of gold that they should be mining versus just calling down a list.
And it was really interesting in the start of the creation of the data for your virtuous loop, because you found the seam early in the company where you could sell to small companies, and they were very willing to give you rights to their data for the returns that they would get, the positive return, the better ROI that they would get by using that. So you're able to mask this data moat with small companies at the beginning, and that intrigued, I assume, the large companies to say, hey, we can get really special results here. Let's join on top of that too.
First part is true. Second part, I put an asterisk on.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely. Like, hey, how would you like a solution to help you dial faster and make your reps more productive? Sure. 5-rep team with a startup. Yeah, great, I'll do it. And it's a modern architected solution. I'm not going to worry too much about the T's and C's. You're telling me that all my data is safe. Great, I'll do it. Of course, it's not that easy when you're negotiating with American Express or Bank of America or T-Mobile. So yeah, in the beginning, let's sell these kind of 5-person sales team, 15-person sales team. Let's move fast. We learned a lot about what you had to do to anonymize and data and make it useful. As we worked our way up, it got harder. As we worked, and it wasn't that they necessarily were they were attracted to the value proposition, but they were scared by the data. And then we had a lot of standoffs. In some cases, we've literally never done a deal where the data rights weren't included.
Right.
But there are companies still today who haven't done business with us because of that. Last week we signed a 7-figure deal with American Express, though, and the week before with Rogers Communications out of Canada, and we've got Bank of America and First Data and some of the most rigorous kind of companies around information security. Had we started there, though, we never would have got there. It had to be kind of the rule of thumb was if I'm contributing less than 1% of the data, of the corpus of data, and I'm getting kind of the benefit of the other 99% back, then I'm probably willing to get creative and kind of figure my way through that. So we had to amass that 99% by working through the small companies.
And you show a progression of companies implementing, I think you called it like 7 steps.
Yeah.
Of implementing machine learning through inside sales. What kind of results are these companies seeing by use of all this anonymized data? Yeah,
that is what gets people to the table. Right. So, CenturyLink, 31% increase in closed business for the teams that are using it. Caesars Entertainment, they're using this technology to help prioritize their VIPs. You think about, I'm sitting at a desk, I'm supposed to be selling stuff to my customers. I can start at A and go down to Z, or I can start with the people I know, because I know they'll return my calls and they'll talk to me. Or I could use machine learning to get the right people to the top of my list. So Caesars uses that for their VIP calling program. $54 million last year, incremental above what they were doing without that.
And this is primarily because of the notion that we talked about with the data and the machine learning algorithms added on top of just the standard workflow software.
It's exactly what it is. It sounds simple, but it's really about prioritization.
Right.
You can call the phone book A to Z, or you can call people who have attributes that make the machine learning algorithms believe that they're more likely to convert on this particular opportunity. And we have historical data that we can use to run that optimization.
And how do you see, it's interesting, some machine learning problems, they'll immediately get to the end result. Some will learn over time and continue to improve. How do you see that for your customers? Is this one where they continue to see improvement as they use the system?
So we've now had 2,000 companies using the system. Right. And for each of those 2,000 companies, all of their sales reps are streaming data back. One way I like to think about it is it's like Waze. It's sort of like MapQuest is to Waze as fill in your favorite static data set. LinkedIn is to inside sales. Like, it's one thing to know where the mile markers are and the roads, and it's another thing to know how to traverse that network optimally. It's one thing to have a list of prospects. It's another thing to know kind of where the money is. And because we have 2,000 companies worth of kind of all the information about their sales cycles, we don't need a critical mass. Let's say a new customer signed up tomorrow, 3M. Mm-hmm. We don't need a critical mass of their data to start adding value, because we've seen the algorithm has seen almost all sales cycles, almost all industries, almost all geographies. So even a sparse data set we can contextualize and start to provide insight to right out of the gates. But to your point, what happens 6 months later? Once I know specifically for 3M the outcomes of all of their calls and emails,
right.
Well, then the algorithms are going to tune to the 3M data, and it's going to be that much smarter, and a year later it's going to be that much smarter.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, and what's interesting also is that people obviously confuse the space with CRM, but you've done a lot of writing about this idea of it being the next generation after CRM. Mm-hmm. And you've actually partnered with CRM systems, right? And they've become your systems of record. You're effectively the engagement system. How do you see this evolution of CRM as partnerships and what you do, and how does that all play together?
There better be an evolution of CRM. I mean, CRM is, we just did the research. Sales reps spend 17% of their time in CRM, which is supposed to be the tool for sales reps. And they spend that 17% of their time begrudgingly. And they spend 65% of their time willingly in places like the inbox, LinkedIn, or tools like ours, Sales Acceleration. Mm-hmm. And part of it's because they want to be looking through the front windshield, not the rearview mirror. If CRM becomes just a system of record for me to record stuff that I've already done and report to my managers, of course I'm going to do it begrudgingly. Right. So I got to be like, if I'm a salesperson, I'm looking for where's the next deal, and I think that's an AI-driven world. Mm-hmm. It's got to guide me to what the next thing is to do, and we have data sets to do that. The problem with the way CRM evolved, when it moved from premise-based systems to the cloud, all sorts of promises were made about, we will not touch your data. We will give you containers to house your data, but we can't access it, we won't touch it, we won't analyze it, we won't commingle it. Please put it in the cloud, it's safe. This is early 2000s, right? Well, now 18 years later, that means any optimization I can run is only in that silo. But a modern application is not built that way. A modern application does the anonymization on the way in and the normalization on the way in, so that I can look at the whole corpus of data, which is kind of what Google and Waze are doing, and that's what we've set up. So there's an interesting partnership between us and Salesforce, between us and Microsoft, between us and Infor, and the Microsoft battle is fascinating. The Microsoft battle is fascinating because not only do they have CRM, which isn't that penetrated compared to Salesforce, but they have the inbox, which everybody uses, all salespeople use, the calendar, and they've got LinkedIn, and they are figuring out how to pull all of that corporate data together to be a 360-degree view. What they need is propensity. So they kind of know where the individuals are from LinkedIn, and they know a little bit about interactions. What they need is propensity. So our partnership with Microsoft is about them knowing identity and us knowing propensity. We want to score the world and put it where people like to work, which is, inbox, LinkedIn, and inside sales.
So there's a lot of evolution in areas where inside sales can go then in terms of use of this data. What do you see next? What's on the horizon besides just effectively closing sales better?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. So the world is changing. The head of research from Forrester has a quote that I will shamelessly repeat here. He says, the modern B2B buyer wants to work with a modern B2B seller. And the modern B2B buyer is a millennial. Right? I mean, millennials are in decision-making roles now. They're on purchasing teams, they're on technology teams, they're on legal teams, they're on business teams, operations teams. They're making purchases. And how do they start their buying journey? It's not by talking to a sales rep. It's by doing research. It's by asking their peers. It's by going on peer review sites. So there's a whole lot that's happening. Like 65% of their decision-making is happening before they ever interact with an individual.
Right.
So we see that kind of marketing funnel, awareness, interest, collapsing into the sales funnel. if 65% of the job is done before a human is involved, what fills in that gap? What about AI-powered bots? Yes, they're doing a lot of that interaction and guiding people. What about signal detection even during the shopping? Yes, you know, people, there's signal across the internet about what people are interested in even before engaging with sales. So we're looking at how that whole funnel is collapsing and where the next generation of signal comes from. We effectively harvested the signal about what works and what doesn't with phone and email. Now let's figure out how to detect signal even earlier.
That's really interesting. And of course, this allows you to have a full platform. So you have the opportunity, in fact, to go beyond sales, I assume, to use prediction.
Yeah.
And you've had some folks that are using your predictive cloud, your core platform, to go beyond sales itself.
Yeah, this data packaged into kind of crisp, clean applications, we can speed up sales teams and kind of get them out of the gates right away. The same data are useful, to your point, for things like churn prediction, cross-sell, upsell recommendations, but they often have to be mixed with operational data from systems other than AI, than CRM. So we've opened up our platform, allowed us to pull in third-party data sets and then build kind of custom algorithms to do those predictions. It's less packaged into an application, more of a platform play at that point.
That's great. So I know our time is almost up, and I was curious, what do you have a call to action for the folks here? Do you have some ideas of how they should be working with you?
Well, I wish I knew who everybody in the room were, and I would, yes, I would. But if you're involved in the industry in a way that's kind of simpatico with the way we're thinking about it, I would love to be talking to you, because we really do see, we're in like the beginnings of the first inning of what can be done with accelerating kind of sales and marketing, harvesting signal, using it to help generate revenue for companies and put food on the table for people and, you know, support human beings. If you're anywhere in that ecosystem, I'd just love to be talking to you about what you're doing and see if we can work together.
Okay, great. Dave, thanks so much.
Thanks
for
Mark.
coming here today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So Spence Green is the co-founder and CEO of Lilt. Lilt's a Palo Alto-based company that is using intelligent software to automate translation for businesses. Was founded in 2011, and they were out of a combination of Google Translate and also out of Stanford. And so we'll be talking about some of the results that they're getting, which have been pretty prolific. And I argue that Lilt is the goal of bringing the speed of Google Translate to the quality of formal translation houses, and basically being able to do that with machine learning and AI at its core. So, so tell us about the history of Lilt. How'd you get started?
Yeah, am I on? We started off, well, actually my co-founder and I have been working on translation for like over 10 years each. And for me, it was living overseas, and where I was walking into bookstores, and like half the bookstore was in one language and half the bookstore was in the other, and there was you couldn't access either way. And so it was right about that time that Google Translate came out, and I was a computer scientist, so this was really exciting to me. But you know, I didn't study machine learning or statistics or anything when I was an undergraduate. So I went to grad school in 2008 to start working on machine translation. And then in 2011, I was at Google interning for my now co-founder. And he was really interested in the way that people use the Google Translate web application, which is that a high fraction of the queries are single word queries. And so it's people using it as kind of a dictionary to learn a language. And so if you use the Google Translate web app, if you put in a single word query, you'll see at the bottom there's this kind of lexical information of synonyms and definitions and so on. And my co-founder John built that. So we had this sort of, I guess, idiosyncratic research interest, which is the way that humans interacted with machines. With these machine translation systems, and how that could be used to augment a human, whether they're learning a language or they're trying to translate a language. And it turns out this is a really old idea from the late 60s, but nobody had ever really gotten it to work. So we started building systems over the next 5 years and kind of got it to work, and then that's when we started the company in 2015.
So this is a very unique approach to language translation, isn't it?
It is, yeah. When we started in 2011, in sort of the consumer case that everybody knows is you go to some website and you click translate in Chrome, or you go on Facebook and you click translate on a post. But for businesses, if you want to translate a book or a marketing article or something, you hire a services business, and they hire a bunch of people and they translate it by hand. And in 2011, very few people were using MT, even though it was like a obviously useful tool. And it's still the case today that few people are using MT in this industry. And so it seemed to us that we should start to try to build systems that would make these people more efficient, with the goal of sort of universal information access, that everybody should be able to access information in their own language. And if you're a business, you should be able to provide a native language customer experience to anybody, regardless of what language they speak.
And is there a way to measure how well the system is learning, how it's improving?
Yeah, you can use this. You can use the same sort of techniques that you use to measure machine translation systems generally. But what we tend to focus on with our customers is whatever business outcomes they have. Some of them are really focused on quality. That's why you would, you can think of sort of generic general domain machine translation like Google Translate is, I don't know, like the federal funds rate. It's like the kind of the baseline, and if you want to go above that, you have to add some value. And so if it's quality they care about, if it's cost reduction they care about, if it's time to market that they care about, those are the sorts of extrinsic factors that we tend to measure.
Okay, great. And is there a scoring system out of that? There are people that have actually done formalized scoring systems.
Of translation quality?
Of translation quality,
yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit of a, like some other, it's a strange machine learning problem, because sort of for every sentence you can have multiple right answers. So it's not like you can compute an accuracy. So there are ways that you can do it automatically, but the sort of the better way is still to do human judgments.
And you've put humans in the loop. So that's also very interesting about what you're doing, is you're sort of blending the best of both worlds right now. So how do you put the human in the loop to be able to improve it?
Yeah, so this problem is, it's sort of known as a mixed initiative problem, which means that you have a human interacting with an intelligent agent, and they're kind of learning from each other. So in our system, the way it works is the machine translation system is not static. It does online learning in production. And so the machine translation system gives suggestions to a human translator while they're working in a workflow tool, which we have like an API, and we also have something that looks like a word processor. And it looks kind of like predictive typing, like when you're typing on your phone. So the machine translation system is giving suggestions to the user while they're translating. This is a bilingual translator. And the translator is then choosing to use parts of the machine translation output to produce a final translation. And now what the result of that is a source sentence and a translation, and that's precisely the training data that you need for a machine translation system. So you just feed that back into the system and it learns. So from the system's point of view, the human is a training data generator, and from the human's point of view, the system is a source of assistance, and you get this kind of virtuous cycle.
So, and you can, by doing it that way, you can apply this to sort of these two separate translation worlds, right? The sort of what I would call the people that are using translation houses today in painstaking ways, and the people that are perhaps doing more translation on the fly but not happy with the results. How big a market opportunity is this?
Yeah, well, so the translation market is like one of the biggest markets you've never heard of before. So it's a $20 billion market, and it's mostly translation services. So it's like less than $1 billion in software and $19 billion in services. And this is just all people manually translating things. And the services, the translation industry writ large translates fewer words in a year than Google Translate translates in a day.
Wow.
So there's a huge market, there's just a huge amount of stuff that doesn't get translated in the world. And that's because it's so expensive, it's so slow, and it's so inconvenient. So that's the sort of problem that we're trying to solve. It should be as convenient and as efficient as going to Google Translate, but you get the quality that you would want to put your business reputation behind.
And what kind of, can you talk about some of the case studies of what some people are doing with your system?
Sure. Let's see, some good ones are, we work with Zendesk Corporate, and so the way that they expose their corporate support site, for a fixed budget, they will use a human in the loop for, say, the top 10 to 15% of pages that are highly ranked and that people view a lot. The machine learns from that, and then you use the machine to translate the long tail, so that even for articles that don't get viewed very much, somebody who doesn't speak English can access them.
Oh, interesting.
And that's great because it cuts down, like a translation is better than no translation. But the economic value of that is increasingly small because it doesn't get seen very much. And so that like reduces support tickets, and that's a great outcome for them. And then they refresh, as translation, it's not just a one-shot operation. There are new articles being written and edited all the time. So as new content is coming out, this machine's learning from that, and you can refresh the whole support site from time to time as the machine translation quality improves.
And are you seeing for these types of applications, are you seeing the human in the loop dissipate with how it's doing, or how does that work over time?
I guess that's more of a social question. It's at this point what the business is comfortable with. Some of our customers want to have a human in the loop for all of their content. Some of them do not. And I think it's more a question of what the business is comfortable with. But invariably over time, machines will take up more and more and more of the workload. That is inevitable.
So they're looking at it, but they may not have to interject as much in the outcome.
That's correct. Yeah. So like over a 1-year time frame, the amount that the machine is doing is, not changing, substantially, because there are people trying to figure out what their optimal fit between the two is. But over, say, a 5 to 10 year time period, it's inevitable that the machines will do more and more of the work.
I mean, I know you're a pretty young company, but are you starting to see that already happen in some companies where their throughput's getting, they're getting more throughput, I guess, through the system?
Oh yeah, so we had that result 4 years ago in a research setting, and it was just that nobody really believed it at the time because there was so much opposition to AI. I mean, the translation industry is interesting because it's been exposed to AI since the late 40s and early 50s, and for most of that period, machine translation hasn't worked at all. It's been pretty bad. So you have like decades of conditioning of systems that are terrible. But there's been a real tectonic shift in machine translation quality in the last 2 years, and now it actually works really well. And so we've got people that translate 3 to 5x faster using our tool versus the way that they work right now, and then you can monetize that to dramatically reduce the cost of translation, and it also increases the quality.
So that's interesting. So a way to think about this is that some companies have their own translators. There's obviously outside translation houses. But I assume for the companies then that have their own translators, you're saying you're actually making their translators more efficient, rather than
faster and better.
Faster and better.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking about this in terms of a computer system that a human looks in every now and then. Here it is. You're sort of using what do we call like augmented AI or
it's augmented. Well, I guess people call it augmented writing
intelligence.
Now.
Yeah.
I mean, in the '60s they called it interactive prediction, but augmented writing is what we call it now. It's just bilingual augmented writing.
So we talked about, at the beginning, we talked about data moats. So you're obviously creating a huge barrier to entry data moat by everybody that uses this as part of your network. What kind of data are you collecting? What's interesting about your data moat?
Well, what's interesting about this workflow is that the people are incentivized to produce really great training data. So as opposed to just like random clicks on the internet, which you can collect a high volume of those, but maybe a lot of them are kind of noisy and don't really represent somebody's intent. I mean, I click on a lot of stuff that I don't care about. Here, the person who's producing the translation for the business, they're incentivized to get it right. And these new machine translation systems, these neural machine translation systems, are more sensitive to the quality and diversity of the data than the quantity. So it used to be in the previous generation of systems, what you wanted to do was align the internet, basically. And the more data you could throw at it, the better it would become, because the model wasn't very expressive. So just giving it more training data was like the best you could sort of do. These new neural systems that are very, very expressive can describe the data very well. And so they're much more sensitive to the quality of data you give them. And so getting data directly out of a workflow where people are incentivized to produce great training data, and you don't have to pay them any money to do that, that's just part of their daily work, is a really great place to be in.
And what exponential growth are you seeing of data that you have now? I mean, you must have a ton of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really dependent on the amount of translation that the business does, but we see growth in all of our accounts. We've only, as you know, been in the enterprise for about 6 or 7 months now.
Right.
Yeah, but all of our accounts are growing very nicely as people are now starting to retool their workflows and their expectations for translation around what they can do now.
Are there languages that are easier than others? What have you started with, focused on? How do you see that? How many languages are you supporting today?
Well, this technology is language independent, so it can support any language. But what's the restriction is the amount of available training data, and so that you can kind of think about that as it's roughly ordered by GDP.
Right.
And that's also good in the enterprise setting because most companies care about translating sort of in rough order of GDP because of market size. So really you have to focus on, as opposed to the Google Translate setting where you want to have like 100 by 100 grid so you can translate from like Hausa to Swahili. Like most businesses don't care about that so much. What you really want to do is be really great at like English to French and English to German.
Right. So you learn much more on the two languages combined.
Yeah,
right.
And usually English is one of those languages, is the sort of global lingua franca.
Yeah, that's great. So I know our time is short, but I'm curious, this vision that we have to go out, do you think there's a point in time where we could get the quality of translation houses to match the speed of Google Translate? Or how close do you think we can get to that?
Well, that question is more properly when will we not need human translators anymore, and when will translation be solved? Right. And translation's in the space of so-called AI complete problems, meaning that if one were to solve it, one would also solve strong AI. And I guess you could place your bets about when that's going to happen. So I think for the foreseeable future, these people will be needed. It's a common sense reasoning task. It requires world knowledge. If anything, the systems are getting more intelligent in mimicking the data that they're trained on, but there's not progress in sort of interjecting facts about the world into these systems. So there's still very much a role for a person in this process. It's just that in the future, one person is going to do the work of 10.
Wow, that's a fascinating business. Great big opportunity. Thank you so much for coming here today.
Mark.
And
yeah.
I'm sure it sounds like there's a lot of people here who are interested in what you're doing.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for coming here. Jennifer Kloke was the first employee. She's the VP of Product Innovation, but she was the first employee at Ayasdi. And Ayasdi is obviously a leading company in terms of AI implementation, particularly around complex data sets. In fact, she earned her PhD at Stanford. Her PhD advisor was one of the co-founders of Ayasdi, Dr. Gunnar Carlson, and she's been an author of several patents, is published quite frequently in the Journal of Differential Geometry, and so thank you for coming here today. And let me just start off by asking you, what was it like at the beginning of Ayasdi? How did it start? I mean, it actually started decades ago with the research, but how did it start, and what was it like when you first joined?
Well, I guess I would say that it started with sort of a realization from our founders when they were working on pure math, so we were all topologists to begin with, that the theory of topology actually has real implications in real data. And DARPA saw the value in this, and we built out the solution to begin with at Stanford, and then DARPA asked us to commercialize it and to make it available for companies so that we can really hone this in. So we started out with as a group of 4 PhD mathematicians, which is kind of an interesting way to start a company. And over time, we've evolved working with enterprises, understanding how they work, what drives and allows them to adopt intelligent solutions, intelligent applications, to build out this platform for rapid development.
So when Ayasdi first started, you had this phenomenal visualization that could show granularly how all this data was working together and down to really small parts, and people could rotate it very quickly and work with it. And it was mesmerizing to all of us, because it was a very early part of the industry, and it sort of led the way for a lot of other things. But visualization is just a very small part of what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about your platform underneath the covers?
Sure. So we hinge on this idea that data has shape, that there's an underlying structure to the data, and that you need to understand that structure first before you know what's the appropriate algorithms and machine learning to use. And so these visualizations are just a hint at that underlying structure, and we allow the human, the subject matter expert, to start to interact and learn and get those ahas from whatever that problem is that they're trying to solve. And so our platform is a framework of using topology together with a large suite of machine learning and AI algorithms to enable that subject matter expert to take advantage of really complex problems and understand them at a variety of levels so that you can make good decisions.
So you've seen a lot of people use it. Can you tell us about a couple of those aha moments where you said, oh my God, and people's eyes lit up over what they were seeing?
Oh, I'm not even sure where to start. I was working with a jet manufacturer, and so they had a very large number of false alarms.
Right.
So there would be a check engine light on the aircraft, and maintainer would go out there, not a thing needed to be corrected. And there's always this fear of the boy who cried wolf, that there are too many false alarms, there's going to be something wrong and nobody's going to do anything about it. And so you definitely want a human in the loop. They wouldn't want just an AI algorithm that said, don't ignore this one. But how do you get that information to the maintainers or to the people who set those thresholds in that jet so that they can make the right call when to pay attention to something and when not to? And so we took just the logs of thousands of flights from this manufacturer, and were able to reduce their false alarm rate by 45%.
Wow.
But every one of those alarms came with the justification. Why was this point predicted? Why are these class of false alarms always false, and why do they look different from the real alarms? So that someone can have that aha. Okay, these are all caused because we're going at a particular speed and there's a certain amount of turbulence, and that's distinctly different from the same alarm that's caused by something valid that's wrong.
Did they believe it in the beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's because it's their own data that's being presented back to them. They get that aha.
So
I could just keep going on examples.
And so it's interesting what you're talking about. It's because, if I can understand this right, it's because it's not black box.
It's completely
right?
not.
Because I can follow the thread of the data and feel comfortable along the way, and that gives me the willingness to, we talked about acceptance. That gives me the willingness to accept what the machine is.
Right, at Ayasdi we feel very strongly that it's not explainable AI where you just know what algorithms were used and what the thresholds were tuned to isn't enough for most problems. You actually need to be able to justify it, to be able to understand at each prediction, what are the drivers, why, and go back to the original data so that some subject matter expert can understand it and have faith and make a confident decision.
So you've got a number of verticals, but in my mind, you started with one of the toughest verticals for acceptance, which is healthcare.
Right.
Right. Tell us a little bit about some of those early pharmaceutical applications and healthcare applications, and not just what you found, but also how people were willing to start to accept the results.
So it comes back to that justification and being able to make a good decision. But the big drive in healthcare is to have value-based care, so that the goal is to have the most positive personal outcomes, health outcomes, but at the smallest cost. So a lot of hospital systems, healthcare systems, both payers and providers are looking to optimize this problem. But oftentimes they're doing it at a really granular level. I'm going to take on the diabetes patients, or I'm going to understand coronary bypass. But what they often miss is the sort of fine-grained details of what's actually happening. You've got to understand the comorbidities of a patient to understand the right process management. So what we developed was the ability to learn from their own clinicians or providers' decisions to learn what are the subpopulations of patients, and within those to be able to hone and pull out the process, the care process, that leads to the most optimal outcomes at the lowest cost. And then be able to present that information back. So it's not just a prediction of this, for this patient, you should treat them this way, but not only that, it's, and here's all the patients that have been seen in your hospital system that look very much like this patient, and how they were treated and what their outcomes were, and by which doctor. And so being able to empower the clinician to do their job well is what allowed for that adoption.
Wow. And because, I've seen applications where the AI system will basically come up with results. It'll be able to predict results, but the hospitals aren't even willing to let people see them because they're afraid of the risk involved, right? So we saw some where they would do that, but all they're willing to use it for today is scheduling, people just seen by doctors. Are you seeing yet where the people actually on the line to make these decisions are willing to use the data as part of their decision process?
We are. So we also have for Intermountain Health Systems, we've helped them develop a risk score for infants coming into the ER, or they've been able to use our platform to do this completely themselves. So when an infant comes into the ER and they have a fever, that's a high-risk situation, a very young infant. And so they needed to have a risk score to know some infants don't need the full lumbar puncture, high-stress situation. They can be treated just fine at home. But how you get that score, people weren't willing to just take a black box score because the risks are way too high.
Right, exactly.
But being able to pull out and understand what's the distinction between the low-risk patients and the high-risk patients and get that back to those doctors so that they can have that, okay, so these patients have these characteristics. That's why they're low risk. And then they can trust it.
Right. Oh, interesting. So it is this whole black box versus open data that allows you to move up that trust curve for even healthcare.
Especially for healthcare.
Especially for healthcare applications.
Right.
You talked a little bit about, you're building a very interesting data moat with what you're doing. And when we talked, you were talking about, a lot of it is about how many columns there are.
Right, so the richness of the data is really important. If you have a massive data set, but you only have 10 features, any human can use lots of different things to sort of extract that information. But the real challenge is when you've got complex phenomena and you've got complex data, which we often think of as many columns, but doesn't necessarily have to be, but really just a rich set of experiences, like those logs off of an airplane jet, like all the characteristics of a patient when you come into a hospital system. And those complex data sets, you don't want to use algorithms that try to throw away and find just the few features that are relevant. You want to take advantage of everything. And so that's what we've built our platform to really handle the complexity that is inherent across
and in this idea of using everything, are your systems learning over time? If I'm somebody like Intermountain Health, if I'm one of your customers, am I starting off with some basic results, but that data is allowing me to get smarter and smarter?
Right.
And how do your algorithms work around that?
So we just feed back into that loop always.
So that you use the virtuous loop.
Yeah.
And what types of improvements are you seeing over time?
Well, if you come in, so let's think about if we're talking about anti-money laundering.
Okay.
So we were able to first pass reduce the false alarm rate for investigators for transactions by 26%, which was a huge for a number of banks because the size of their investigators staff is just growing as Europe is really coming down on the fines are getting huge for companies for banks for not catching money laundering. The reduction was very large. And then because we now have an application that lets the crime investigators validate, yes, this is real, no, this is not. That immediately feeds back as we improve that process of the flagging of an investigation.
And I assume a lot of this, it's hard in the types of applications you're being asked to do. It's hard to move to production right away. So you're starting with, I assume, proof of concepts. What is that process like to move customers along so they say, okay, let's put it in production?
Right.
Now.
So we strongly feel that AI tends to stop at a model, but models aren't enough to move into production. You have to think about the way that people want to interact with that AI. So UX is really important, and so we've realized this, and so we've built a platform that the platform now enables rapid development of these applications, and in a way that's IT friendly, because oftentimes in a loop with moving it into operation, IT becomes involved, and if you don't have sort of a streamlined IT friendly interface, then innovation can stop at just the model and not make it into production. And so that's been a big part of what we do, and then also thinking about scale. The scale of the problems grows as you go into production, and making sure that we're ready for that.
And how big are some of these implementations now? Is there any way to
It's going to vary dramatically from which vertical you're in.
I mean, so which verticals tend to produce? And
so financial services always
right,
has the largest scale, number of transactions, number of customers, and interactions. So we have an application for complaints prediction. So you can it sits within a bank and being able to monitor all customer interactions and being able to predict which customers are most likely to complain, but also why they're most likely to complain, so that you can get ahead of that. But that, you're constantly running daily over all of the customers that the bank has, and these are large banks.
And what were they doing before you came around?
I'm not really sure.
But they weren't getting, obviously they weren't getting these results.
No, they were definitely.
They weren't getting these results.
Lots of press for their poor ability to handle.
Yeah, no, exactly. What's next for Ayasdi? Which directions are you headed now?
We're headed towards democratizing the AI experience, getting the ability to solve problems and drive change into the hands of subject matter experts. Because it shouldn't live just in a DS team. It can't. DS can't scale to the problems that enterprises need to have solved.
So you're going beyond the data scientists, basically, to
your data aware, to
regular
people who understand
business
problems.
Analysts,
exactly.
Potentially to line of business owners. So the ability to basically make this easier and easier for a larger group in the company to use.
Right. So even the business units have access to the data, but they don't have the sophistication to solve it. So when they have a problem that they need solved, they tend to pass it off to some isolated data science team,
right,
which are way understaffed. And then what gets lost is the understanding from that data. If a subject matter expert had looked at a particular outcome, maybe they would have seen something completely different that they would have wanted to say, that is what I want to use to go forward. But that, because it gets separated, that information gets lost. And so we want to get that back into the hands of the people who understand the problems in the business.
That's great. So I know our time is short here, but I'm curious, do you have some words of wisdom for people in the audience on how to implement AI?
I would say, don't park AI in an innovation lab and an R&D group. You want to get to a place where you can get something operational. Don't be afraid of data that isn't complete and clean. I think all too often people are afraid because the data isn't perfect. But work with what you have, because there's a lot of richness that's there. And be comfortable with thinking ahead about that process change that's necessary for people to adopt an AI solution.
It seems like when you implement, to also implement for users that currently aren't using it, to continue to allow it so it'll grow through usage in your organization.
So that and do it in a way that they are comfortable, that it augments the work that they're doing instead of feeling like it's a replacement.
That's awesome.
Empower people to do their job better.
That's awesome, Jennifer.
Right.
Thank you very
Mark.
much. Thank you for coming here today.
It.
So, Slava, I should have asked you, Zhakov?
Yes.
Is that close? Okay. Close enough. Is the CTO at Genesys, and he's responsible for all product development, setting the company's technical vision, leading all aspects of the technology development and innovation. Genesys is now a 25-year-old company, and he actually started there in 1998. And before joining that, he was at Alcatel-Lucent, and has also founded Program Technique, a software development company, was a professor at St. Petersburg University in aerospace instrumentation. Slava, thank you very much for being here today. You're the unusual case, I would say, here of the four companies, because you were part of an existing company long before machine learning, AI, or data, or any of that was being used. I mean, you're now, what, 10,000 customers? Public company? Tell me about how you had this idea. How were things changing? How you had this idea to start implementing data and machine learning, and what that looked like when you got started within Genesys?
Absolutely. First of all, one of the reasons why I've been so long with Genesys is that every year it's pretty much a different company. And when I joined, it was a tiny small startup with pretty much zero revenue, and we got by now to 1.4 billion. And 10,000 large and small enterprises as our customers. And it's impossible to stay in business for so long if you don't reinvent yourself a few times. And to my recollection and to my calculation, we have reinvented ourselves at least 4 times in a very big way. And our management team, which stays as long as I stayed with the company as well, we all believe in this innovator's dilemma. And the trick that we do at every big turn in the industry is that we are trying to reinvent ourselves before someone else reinvents ourselves. And we read all the innovator's dilemma, solution, etc. books and like the approach. So with this in mind, first of all, machine learning and artificial intelligence is not completely new for us. We have a pretty strong team with a very long history. As you guys all know very well, AI goes through hype cycles, and I'm old enough to live through 2 of them by now. And in the first hype cycle, I was working with neural networks to recognize text. Until approximately 2012, we felt that in our industry, first amount of data was not available. And probably the market demand was not there either. And we started to feel that somewhere around a little bit earlier, probably 2010, we started to do first research and prototyping. Our playbook to reinvent ourselves is to start a very small group of people, usually extremely high, productive and talented.
Yeah, you said the company's 5,000 people, and you did this starting with 6 people. Right?
At that time, it was in 2012. We were in range of probably 1,000 people.
Okay.
But yes, we started a group of 6 highly talented, highly productive guys. We gave them full autonomy, and they started to do research. Then we progressively kept growing the team and integrated everything they do into many of our products.
So of course, Genesys is a world leader in call centers, contact centers. You call it customer experience because it's omni-channel. The machine learning that you're using, is this to improve the results of your current products, or are you inventing new products for that?
That's the next frontier that I see, the new products. Right now, we're at the stage where we just optimize the existing products everywhere where our products have some business rules or business logic or something pre-configured by humans. We are inserting machine learning capabilities, and it achieves 2 results. First, it creates a much faster way to develop applications. And second, as much as I hate admitting it, but our experience, as well as I'm pretty sure everyone here in the room, is that machine solves tasks better than humans. This is the second outcome, that every time when we introduce new capabilities, when we do A/B testing, and when we compare results with manually configured business rules, it's always machines win substantially.
So David inside sales talks a little about the result improvements they're seeing in the sales process. How are you seeing that manifest itself in the call center and contact center?
Absolutely. Our numbers, percentage-wise, are a little bit less impressive, but dollar-wise, they are arguably very impressive. Today, as I said, we start optimizing existing things, and we observe routinely on either sales or marketing results, marketing campaign efficiency, or customer satisfaction, or cost optimization. We see results in range of between 5 to 15%.
Wow.
But we deal with the companies that spend $200–300 million, and those 10% are very quickly becoming very material jaw-dropping impact on the company.
And you've been around long enough, or Genesys has been around long enough that you've seen this whole evolution from behind the firewall to the cloud, and now to the cloud with data. And have you had to change the way you interact with customers to have access to data and all that, or how have you approached being an AI-first company within a company?
Completely changed. And a cloud was one of the reinvention of our industry that has been happening, and it's still happening. It's not completely done. But by now, our industry really seriously shifts to cloud. And cloud brings lots of new things. And one of them is for sure access to data, anonymization of data, making sure that the data cannot be re-engineered to create a secondary effect, like all those famous stories like people getting Uber logs. Even if it was anonymized data, they were able to figure out individuals and where they traveled. Things like that is a new reality that we're dealing with, and it's pretty exciting.
And what kind of data mode are you building? I mean, how much, I mean, if you have 10,000 customers, how much data is now available to you, and what types of pieces of this data are you using to get better results?
So it's we're handling something in the range of 28-30 billion interactions a year, and it's a pretty massive data. And we have customer, meaning consumer profiles, and business profiles, and we have every single detail about interactions. And interestingly, what we noticed, absolutely from this perspective, it very well resonates with me, the story that the more data you have and the more parameters you can collect, the more insights you can get. This is exactly how it works for us. Some absolutely unexpected parameters might suddenly produce very interesting results for the companies.
And just out of curiosity, does your customers understand the basis of this new platform, or do they just see the better results? Do they ask you what you're implementing, and do they want to understand the technology and all that?
Our approach as we speak is to make it a competitive differentiation. There are a few companies in our space that provide elements of what we do, but we have two very interesting advantages. First, we have access to all the data. And second, we have access to control points. We can exercise control points based on the data. We can route phone calls. We can analyze sentiment in Facebook. We can apply chatbot automation, and et cetera, et cetera. So because of those two things, it's important for us that our customers really deeply understand, and we also have luxury of not offering them rip and replace. We say, look, it's your existing Genesys system. You don't need to rip it off and replace with something else.
Okay.
What you can do, you can start at your own pace. If you are scared, you can start with a small subset of your business, take a look how it goes. We offer A/B testing. We offer all those elements and pilots, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on the result of that, you can expand. In order to succeed with this strategy, we 100% open everything. We sit down with the customers. We explain them, this is our model. This is how the product works. This is how it worked before. This is how you can do A/B testing. And we literally guide them through all those processes and open everything to them. And they greatly, greatly appreciate that.
Interesting. And I assume with the data, you can do A/B testing much faster than you could have done before. So are you seeing people that an application like this starts to move to real time when you do the A/B testing fast enough? Are you seeing people that are doing short A/B tests, and then out of that they turn around and say, okay, now I'm going to run it this way for a while based on that? And
so first of all, everything we do works in real time, and this is the biggest advantage, because it is in real time when you select which particular customer representative is the best fit for this particular consumer. It is happening in real life. When the phone is ringing, we're making those decisions. And so it is all real time. And for us, A/B testing means that our customers collect feedback from those real-time interactions for some period of time, and they compare with the same behavior without this AI capability.
Wow. So Slava, you've been in this industry for a while, and where do you think it's going? Well, how do you see data and machine learning, all this, transforming this industry?
Very good question. Of course, I'm the most excited to talk about what's going to happen in 5,000 years, but
that's okay.
For now,
will we still have call centers in 5,000 years? We'll even use phone call. We'll even use omni-channel customer experience in 5 years, or I think we'll just think about it, right? And you'll know what I'm thinking. So, but
you know, if you look at the trajectory, I've heard so many times that contact centers are going to disappear, and at the same time, every single year I see more and more importance of this. So I think on the serious note, in the short-term frame, we for sure will see. I absolutely concur with what Lilt is saying, that for the foreseeable future, we will see combination of humans and machines. Machines will progressively take over everything that is and can be automated. The trend that we observe is that businesses are becoming more complex. And as businesses becoming more complex, they, on every single day, create more and more complex service. If long time ago, people were going to the branch to learn their balance, then they were going to a contact center, then they were going to an IVR, now they're going to mobile application. So all those tasks are not only automated, but the level of automation goes up and up and up. At the same time, the banking products and the banking questions are becoming so more complex nowadays that humans are still important. So what I see that the simpler the task is, the more automatable it is, it will go to AI, but I still see the need for humans, at least for the next 4,000 years.
So the next 4,000 years. So bots won't be doing all our customer call center, contact centers, there's still going to be humans in the loop.
Yes, that's what I believe.
That's fair. That's very fair.
One comment on this that might be interesting for people in this room. Automation is not a new concept in our industry. We have large banks that have 85% of all their interactions automated as we speak, without all that fancy AI that I'm talking about.
Right.
At the same time, the same bank that has 85% of interactions fully automated, they still employ 60,000 of humans to serve the remaining 15%. So I see this trend of very small percentage, but very, very important and very complex tasks still being done by humans.
That's really great. So we are the last things between ourselves and lunch.
Sorry, guys.
So I think, do you have any call to action for this audience for the use of the products that you're doing, or things that they should be thinking about?
I might completely miss the point, but anticipating the audience and anticipating what type of additional insight I might give, I would say that if you want to deal with large companies or established companies, I would give an advice that try to make your product or your capability complementary to what they do, and by doing this, you can very naturally insert yourselves into their processes and give them a bigger advantage.
And so integrate these together.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you, Slava. Thank you for coming here
Sure,
today.
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.